The blood wouldn't stop. It pooled dark and thick beneath her body, soaking into the sand like the desert was trying to swallow her whole. Petty Officer Jake Morrison had seen combat wounds before. Too many to count, but something about this one felt different. Something about her felt different. The woman lying in front of him wasn't screaming, wasn't crying, wasn't even trembling. She just stared up at the smoke-filled sky with eyes that had seen things no civilian ever should. And that's when Jake's hands, trained to move with precision under pressure, suddenly hesitated. They'd found her in the wreckage of a supply convoy that had been hit hard by an ambush just outside Kandahar. The insurgents had vanished into the hills like ghosts, leaving behind twisted metal, shattered glass, and bodies that would haunt the team's dreams for years. Jake's SEAL unit had arrived minutes too late to stop the attack, but just in time to search for survivors. That's when they heard it. A faint sound, almost like a whisper, coming from beneath an overturned Humvee. Two of his teammates lifted the wreckage, and there she was, a woman in dusty civilian clothes, her dark hair matted with blood, her face streaked with dirt and pain. At first glance, she looked like a contractor, maybe an aid worker caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Jake had learned long ago that first glances could lie. He dropped to his knees beside her, his medic bag already open, hands moving fast to assess the damage. Shrapnel wound to the abdomen, possibly internal bleeding, fractured ribs. She needed a medevac, and she needed it now. "Stay with me," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "We're gonna get you out of here. Just hang on." She didn't respond. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Instead, her hand, trembling, slow, moved to her chest and pressed against something hidden beneath her torn shirt. Jake's instincts flared. He'd seen that gesture before. It was the movement of someone protecting something more valuable than their own life. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently, reaching to move her hand so he could apply pressure to the wound. But the moment his fingers brushed hers, her eyes snapped to his with a sharpness that made him freeze. It wasn't fear in those eyes. It wasn't confusion. It was command. Authority. The kind of look you don't get from a civilian. The kind of look that stops a Navy SEAL in his tracks. And then he saw it. The edge of a dog tag chain peeking out from under her collar. The faint outline of a tactical knife sheath strapped to her thigh beneath the ripped fabric. And scars on her forearms that told stories of battles fought long before this one. Jake's breath caught. His team leader, Chief Dalton, crouched beside him, eyes scanning her injuries, and then he saw it too. The recognition hit them both at the same time. "Jesus," Dalton whispered. "She's not a civilian." Jake's hands moved faster now, cutting away fabric, applying pressure, calling for the medevac, with a new urgency. Because this wasn't just a wounded woman. This was one of them. Maybe not a SEAL, but something close. Something equally dangerous, equally brave, equally broken by the same wars they'd all been fighting. As he worked, she finally spoke. Her voice was barely audible, rasping through cracked lips. "Don't stop the mission!" Jake's jaw tightened. Of course that's what she'd say. Even bleeding out in the sand, even with her life slipping away with every heartbeat, her first thought wasn't survival. It was the mission. He'd heard those words from his brothers before, usually right before they did something stupidly heroic. "We're not leaving you," Jake said firmly. "Mission can wait." "You can't." Her eyes flickered with something, gratitude maybe, or disbelief that someone would say that to her. "My team," she whispered. "They didn't make it." The weight of those words hung in the air heavier than the smoke. Jake glanced at Dalton, and in that silent exchange, they both understood. She'd been part of a unit. She'd watched them die, and she'd survived, which meant she'd carry that guilt for the rest of her life, if they could keep her alive long enough to carry anything at all. The medevac bird roared overhead, kicking up a storm of sand and noise. Jake kept his hand pressed tight against her wound, his other hand gripping hers. "You did good," he told her. leaning close so she could hear him over the chaos. "Whatever happened out there, you did good. Your team would be proud." A single tear slid down her cheek, cutting a clean line through the dirt and blood. She squeezed his hand, just once, barely enough to feel, and then her eyes began to close. "No, no, no, stay with me!" Jake shouted, shaking her gently. The helicopter landed, medics sprinting toward them with a stretcher. He didn't let go of her hand until they physically pulled him away. 3 weeks later, Jake sat in a hospital room in Landstuhl, Germany, staring at the woman in the bed. She was awake now, bruised and bandaged, but alive. Her name was Captain Elena Cross, Army Intelligence, embedded with a classified unit doing work most people would never know about. She'd been carrying intel that had saved dozens of lives. Intel she refused to abandon even when her convoy was destroyed. When she saw Jake walk in, she smiled. Tired but real. "You came back," she said softly. Jake nodded. "Told you we don't leave our own." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Thank you for seeing me, for not just seeing another casualty." He pulled a chair close and sat down. "You were never just another casualty. Not to us. Not to anyone who knows what it means to bleed for something bigger than yourself." They sat in silence for a while. Two warriors who understood that some wounds never fully heal, but some connections forged in blood and sand last forever. And in that quiet room, far from the desert and the war, Elena Cross realized something she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Because in the brotherhood and sisterhood of those who serve, no one bleeds silent, and no one is ever truly forgotten.